Hi again, everyone. I now would like to call another friend of a friend. My friend Gabriel is a huge wealth of friends all around the world. And so I now want to call one of his friends named Chip Conley, who owns a hotel chain around all of the United States. So let's give him a call and see what he's going through.
My name is Chip Conley, and I am in Baja California Sur, which is the southern tip of the Baja Peninsula in Mexico. That's where I live most of the time. It's where our modern Elder Academy is. And my background is I've been a hospitality entrepreneur for 34 years and was one of the first boutique hoteliers in the United States. Spent 7 years helping Airbnb grow into a big company, and then have had a curiosity about creating the world's first midlife wisdom school. And that's what I'm doing here in Baja.
How long has the Modern Elder Academy been around?
We opened it in January 2018 on a beta basis, trying it out. And then it opened to the public in November of 2018. And we've had 800 people go through the 1 week or 2 week program from 24 countries. It's a social enterprise, which means that we actually provide scholarships to more than 50% of the people who come. Average age is 52 to 53, but we've had people as young as 30 and as old as 88. So the idea is people want to come and figure out how to cultivate and harvest their own wisdom and shift their mindset on what it means to age.
Wow, what an incredibly amazing mission you guys have. And how would someone get in touch with this program?
So modernelderacademy.com, you can find that online or .org, either one. And then I have a blog called Wisdom Well, and it's a daily blog that's on the Modern Elder website. So that's a way for people to understand some of the points of view and the curriculum and how we articulate this new way of living and this new mindset toward aging.
Do you still own the hospitality chain that you had before?
I sold Joie de Vivre, the company I started at age 26. It turned into the second largest boutique hotelier in the United States. But I still own the real estate of some of the hotels. So I don't own the brand or the management company, but the brand of Joie de Vivre, which I don't own anymore, manages hotels that I own with partners.
How do you think we as a nation and as a globe should be dealing with the economic backlashes that are to come?
It's an interesting question because there's emotional. It's not just economic; it's emotional as well. And let's start with that. On the emotional side, I'm a big believer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so in some ways, our safety and physiological and safety needs are at risk here. And when people go to that state, that state of mind and state of being, they have a tendency to not want to go very far from home. And they have a tendency to just want to hang out with their clan, with the people that they know well. So what that means for anybody in the travel industry, myself included, it's tough because the economics will follow the emotions. And so I do think that there's some risk that the travel industry as a whole is going to go through not just a recession, but a depression. And there's no doubt it is in a depression right now in terms of just basically people are not traveling. But how long does that last? I don't, that's above my pay grade to know because it has a lot to do with public health knowledge that I don't have. I think that the other thing that is going to be problematic, though, is there's going to be a lot of finger pointing. Like, okay, so it's all China's fault, or it's all Italy's fault, or it's all the United States' fault, or whomever. And that finger pointing just balkanizes the world a little bit more, such that it's another reason not to travel. Because why do I want to go to travel to that place where I don't like those people because they help spread that worldwide pandemic. So I think it's not so great. I think the flip side of this, from both a emotional and an economic perspective, is we have never had a pandemic during the kind of era we're in right now, where everything happens so quickly and it's all on social media and traditional media. So everybody's aware overnight and everybody's literate. I mean, 1918, half the population was not literate. Doesn't mean they didn't hear about it, but they couldn't read about it. They certainly didn't have Google. And so I think the awareness of the pandemic globally and the fact that there is the possibility of a reset, a global movement that just says, let's learn from this, could mean a resurgence or an emergence of new kinds of businesses and industries and ways people spend their money that are different than the past, or they're in evolution. Like people have definitely moved in the last 20 years to the experience economy, more focused on, more desirous of buying experiences than buying material products. Could that accelerate? Yes, I think that could accelerate.
Even in my industry, social impact entertainment is becoming, a hot topic term. And the branding around things also has so much, power behind it. So the fact that we are now post, Me Too, and people truly feeling like they have a stake in what they are experiencing on every platform that they experience it from, I think is shaping and almost kind of pre-shaped this ability for us to, have this type of connection, and people wanting to watch it or people wanting to experience that thing. And I think that goes across the board for every brand, be it a product or a service. So there was already a big push for companies to create, brand reliance in the fact that you should want to, as a consumer, be a part of that person's brand. And I think that this is going to push that into even more of a need for small businesses, even up the chain to really large corporations. This reset that you speak about is going to take some time. It's not going to happen instantly.
I also think another thing that's going to come out of it is a growing sense of people wanting to invest in community. Again, I think that this is again an evolution. This has been in process. The more one of the things that I spent some time on is studying the festival world and created a website called Fest 300, dedicated to giving an annual award to the 300 best festivals in the world of all kinds, including religious pilgrimages as well. So it's not just music festivals; it's arts and cultural festivals, food festivals, film festivals, religious pilgrimages. My belief was that the more digital we get, the more ritual we need, and festivals are a form of ritual. I was on the board of Burning Man for a decade, and so I understand ritual in the form of festival pretty well, and I was able to go around the world studying it. And so I do think the idea of how do we create community in new ways? Some of that will be online, though. I mean, some of the creating community is going to be, how do we, if you look at the evolution of video conferencing or video calls, we're probably really in the early stages of what it ultimately will be. And how are the ways you customize it, especially if it takes a direction that has more of a virtual reality piece to it as well. So I think there's an element that I hate the idea as a travel industry person that we're all going to be staying in place, putting on our virtual reality glasses and looking at the Grand Canyon or whatever, and having conversations with people without having to travel. Because actually, I do believe that the IRL experience, the in real life experience, is different than the URL experience. because it allows our mirror neurons in our brains to dance together and to feel a palpable sense of collective effervescence, which is a term that came from 110 years ago. Again, Emile Durkheim, a French sociologist who studied religious pilgrimages. So, long story short, is I'm bullish on the idea that some level of transformation is going to come out of this, and I'm also realistic enough to know there could be the opposite, which is a sense for people that there's a lot of finger pointing. There's a lot of like people selfishly trying to get what they think they deserve because they have suffered through this experience alone, as if no one else in the world had suffered through it.
I am really glad you brought up Burning Man. Our mutual friend Gabriel is the one that connected us, and he also has gone to Burning Man. And I actually have never experienced it and didn't even really truly know, other than what I saw on media, what Burning Man actually was. And talking to him at the first dinner we ever went to just really opened my eyes to Burning Man being a microcosm of a society, and the rules that you create are all rules that everyone has to abide by because everyone created them. What would you say, as like with Burning Man as a case study for the rest of the world to go through this time?
Like in the last week, I have written a blog post which said, "Is Burning Man the new default world?" And there are 10 principles that define Burning Man. And I had written a blog post back then in 2013 about what are some of the key lessons of Burning Man, and some of the lessons relate to what does it mean to be shelter in place as well. The first lesson is islands are more intense. So there's, whether it's cabin fever or island fever, people are feeling cabin fever right now. Island fever is what happens at Burning Man because when you go there, it's not porous. You get inside and you're there then. Now it's big enough so you can have some space, but the truth is there's a bit of a sense of like the intensity of the crucible. And but I think that there's whether it's the idea of immediacy, being in the moment with people, or radical self-expression, or radical independence, being able to take care of yourself. The idea of the sense of community that's being built, and that we make our own rules. All of these things, I do think there's a lot to be learned. And I think Burning Man has learned from programs in the past. I went to a festival in 2013 that is the largest festival of humankind, 100 million people for 55 days, 100 million people over the course of 55 days. It's called Maha Kumbh Mela. So it's Kumbh Mela, it's Kumbh, second word Mela. It's the largest Hindu festival in the world at the Ganges River. Every 3 years, it's in a different location on the Ganges River in India. And then every 12 years, they have the Maha, which is the big one. The small ones are still like 10 or 15 million people, but the big one is, 100 million people over the course of 55 days. And Burning Man, and that's been going on for a long time. I can't remember how long, but like hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Burning Man is just a pilgrimage. It's a religious pilgrimage. The religion is, not your traditional religion. It's not Hinduism. It's not Christianity. But it is a pilgrimage. And I think the idea of people being in community for pilgrimage and for ritual, I really do think that's coming back, because I think it's the antidote to people feeling sort of the sense of existential inertia, or our life was very much historically revolved around churches and rituals, or not just churches, any kind of religious institution and rituals, religion and rituals. Well, that's not as big today, but there is still a thirst for community, for meaning, and I believe for some form of ritual as a way to help be a threshold for people from one place in their life to another.
I completely agree. I think that we have never, as a society, been this connected. Like I can talk to anyone across the globe with the push of a button. Right. But there's also so much global depression and anxiety and, things of that nature that people are going through, because even though we have the access, it's not tangible in the same way that we're used to as a species. So I think that we are evolving through, that type of communication.
That's true. But I do think also that, social media has its upsides and its downsides, and its downsides are pretty clear. I mean, people do have it. There's the sense of FOMO and the sense of not feeling not good enough, the self-esteem issues that come up for people. Frankly, the loneliness and level of social media activity are really correlated. It's not sure what's causing it, though. Is loneliness cause social media work? You're lonely before you go to social media, or does social media create loneliness? It's hard to know, but it is. I appreciate the fact that there's a lot of research that's been done in the last 5 years on this particular topic.
Can you give any advice to small businesses across the globe, even up to large businesses who are dealing with this, on just what they should do through this time?
Here's a few thoughts. Number one is leaders are the emotional thermostats for those they lead. So what does that mean? It basically means you set the climate control. So if you're full of anxiety as the leader, guess what? People will be feeling that. Or if you're sort of out there in the blue, the blue yonder, being a Pollyanna and too much of an optimist and not a realist, then everybody will follow you there, or at some point lose trust in you. So I believe quite strongly that it's important to be exceptionally transparent in a crisis time, because anxiety is the combination of uncertainty and powerlessness. So the things that a leader really needs to do right now is help people feel that they have some certainty in a time of uncertainty and some sense of influence in a time of powerlessness. So that's the first step. And I wrote a lot about this in my book, Emotional Equations. Secondly, I think it's really important to know that a leadership team needs to feel that this is their opportunity to have their greatest learning in their lifetime, and to actually come together in a unified way. That starts with the transparency and the trust, but that actually then allows for some space for conflict. And some leaders who are conflict avoidant won't allow that space, but actually it's really a healthy thing in a time like this to have vigorous debate, as long as it's full of respect. But the debate allows for people to open up to possibilities that are not standard, things that we might not have done in normal times. So I think, while individual leaders are a thermostat, I think a group of leaders, basically have such a huge influence on the culture of an organization. But what tends to happen is often in a downturn, everybody's finger pointing. And everybody in the organization knows that the leadership team is not aligned. And that's when everybody starts to freak out. So having a really aligned leadership team that's open to, behind closed doors, having strong disagreements, but then aligning around whatever the decision is, that's pretty important. Cash flow, really essential right now. Assume the worst when it comes to your recovery, which is terrible. I mean, assuming the worst, frankly, means you're going to go out of business. So don't assume that necessarily. Although truly, if you should go out of business, figure it out, accept failure, accept that being a failure right now in this times, everybody will understand it. Nobody can look at you and say, you're a failure. So don't personalize, the economic consequences. It's interesting that the word depression speaks both to the economics and the emotions of someone. And so be careful to have your emotions too wrapped up in the economics. And then finally, I would just say, double down on your evangelists. If you have a collection of people who are your biggest supporters, in whatever form they are, whether they're community support or donors or investors or most importantly, customers, figure out how to ask for help from those people without sounding like you're too desperate, in such a way that people know that part of their role right now is to support you. How could they support you? Well, maybe you're closed. Let's say your business is closed and people love you. What you could use right now is gift certificate income. And of course, your customers might say, I've lost my job. I don't. So yes, it is a hard time to generate revenue, which is why cash flow is important. But for some people, it's like, yeah, I own a place called Kabuki Springs and Spa. It's the largest spa in San Francisco. It's closed, of course, massages and things like that. We sell like maybe $800,000 a year in gift certificates there. That's a lot of gift certificates. So as we're talking about this, I'm going to go talk to my general manager there and just say, you know what, we're closed. Let's go out and do a mailing campaign to ask people to buy gift certificates. Because the nice thing about buying gift certificates is people get something for it in the future. So in many cases, in some ways it comes back to the cash flow question. Why not ask? Why not say, I'm going to give you this in the future, but I actually need the cash now?
I also think that there's something super interesting about the fact that if you buy gift certificates right now, you are essentially giving yourself hope. Like, that money that you're spending is saying, you know what, this is a really difficult time. And in 3 months, I'm going to reward myself with a spa day. I talked to another, one of my guests, and they suggested, instead of, they're not buying coffee every day, so maybe send that $4 or $5 to a barista that they know, just as a way to support the people that you actually interact with every day. And so there are tons of ways right now with Venmo and Cash App and all of that stuff to literally help the world around you if you have that ability. I've been asking everybody what their current experience is, like their level of quarantine and things like that. You're in a part of the country not a lot of people have ever been to. And so what is your personal experience right now through this sheltering in place?
So I'm in Mexico, in Baja California, which is just south of the U.S. version of California, Alto California, Baja California. We're in a remote beach community that is a fishing and farming community. And so because it's remote, you can go for walks on the beach or in the desert nature and have no worry about social distancing. And so one of the beautiful things about being quarantined and sheltering in place here is you do have some space to sort of interact with nature. So that is part of our experience. We have a group of us who are quarantined together. There are 7 of us adults who are quarantined together, and then a couple of kids. So we're very careful about the rules and regulations we have with each other, because we don't keep an eye on each other during the day. So if someone has to go into town, which is about a 15-minute drive away, it's like, okay, this person's coming back, and when they're back, we're not social distancing. We're being careful. No one's hugging each other, but we're having meals together, sitting next to each other on occasion. So our experience here has been very different than the United States. Now, Mexico is about a month and a half behind the U.S. in terms of the virus spreading. The good news down here is they've taken steps earlier in the process than the United States did. Although, frankly, the president of Mexico has been a bit of a nut in terms of going out and hugging everybody he can, until finally he realized that was not a good idea. But the government actually, even though the president was doing that, the government was actually starting to create rules in place. And so, life here is, I think the thing that's most satisfying is the spaciousness. Our lives are really sped up. That's for sure. Mine is, at least. And I feel like life is in slow motion right now. And I'm appreciating that.
Looks like we're running out of time. I know you have another meeting to run off to. So I wanted to first thank your assistant, Lily, who is incredible. Good job on finding her. She's so
Thank you.
good. Thank you for taking the time to talk about all of the things you have and helping bring people, closer together around the world.
I appreciate what you're doing, Colin, and I just think the fact that you're doing this and expanding the collection of people who can listen to you and experience you and in different ways is beautiful.